The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, and his cabinet have signed with local indigenous communities from La Guajira a pact for a fair energy transition. The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, has had to convene a crisis cabinet given the strong protests already taking place in several parts of the country. And the Court of Appeals of the United Kingdom declared a British government plan to deport migrants to Rwanda as unlawful. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Wednesday, the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, signed the Pact for a Just or a Fair Energy Transition with the local indigenous communities in the department of La Guajira. The Petro administration has proposed to the energy sector companies a new model of permanent partnership in which the YU communities will be allies. Signed by 140 indigenous authorities in the area of influence of the projects, 12 development companies, a trade union, and representatives of the national and local government and international cooperation, the effort is aimed at consolidating clean energy projects that are already underway in the department of La Guajira, located in the northeast of the country. And the violence recorded in recent months in Ecuador is forcing the authorities to assess the risks of the electoral process that will take place in August. For this reason, 16 institutions of the Ecuadorian state have met to implement a state or a plan that includes police protection for the presidential candidates. Here is the report from our correspondent, Elena Rodriguez.
Inaugurated the National Security Table in Quito on Wednesday. The objective is to draw up a roadmap to articulate measures to guarantee the normal development of the presidential and legislative elections and the popular consultation scheduled for August 20.
As the National Electoral Council, we are at the head of this table and we are taking up the challenge that implies interinstitutional coordination. However, this is not a solitary task, and we understand that the issue of insecurity in the country is not an easy one and cannot be taken lightly. Therefore, we condemn and categorically reject all acts of violence, wherever they come from.
The signing of cooperation agreements intended to prevent acts of violence. The aim to guarantee the maintenance of public order at all stages of the electoral process. The Minister of the Interior assured that the 8 presidential candidates would be protected by the police during the election campaign.
The police will not tolerate violent actions. If we have to act with firmness, we will do so, with respect for human rights. Yes, but with firmness, because it cannot be possible that people who want to create chaos in the country use this democratic process to create it.
On Tuesday evening, the political group Revolución Ciudadana denounced the detonation of an explosive device in a demonstration in the city of Guaquillas, in the southwestern province of El Oro.
We have no injuries, and immediately after the event, there was a police presence accompanying the event, and this is a strategy of the operations that are planned. Any event that has a certain level of risk is accompanied by the police.
Climate factors are also among the risks to be considered.
A simulation will be carried out together with the National Secretariat of Risk Management to identify the possible scenarios that could affect the electoral process due to the development of El Niño.
The election security table will be made of more than 16 state institutions, 70 crisis rooms, and 14 operational rooms in the 24 presidential delegations will be activated during the process.
Elena Rodriguez, TeleSUR Ecuador.
And now we move on to other topics. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador confirmed the kidnapping of at least 14 police officers in Osocutualba in Chiapas in the southeast of the country. In his morning press conference, the president detailed that the kidnapped persons are workers of that locality prison. López Obrador also stressed that neither in this nor in other cases will there be impunity. Regarding the possible causes of the kidnapping, the president announced that according to the first investigations, it is a confrontation between criminal groups. During the last hours, a video circulated in social networks where an armed group allegedly deprived the police officers of that region of their freedom. In response to the kidnapping, the Secretariat of the Security and Citizen Protection of Chiapas deployed an operation to find the victims and arrest those responsible.
They are prison workers from Ocosocuautla who were detained, kidnapped. As we were saying, the instruction is to rescue alive those who were kidnapped. The message to the criminals is that there will be no impunity. They shouldn't think it will be like before.
And now we address other topics. In Mexico, more than 1,000 hectares in various municipalities of Hidalgo have been damaged by over 100 forest fires recorded so far in 2023. According to Mexico's National Forestry Commission, the state currently faces several threats, such as illegal logging, agricultural expansion, and smokers as the possible causes of the forest fires that broke out so far this year. Other possible causes are livestock activities, waste burning, hunters, and bonfires. In a press conference last week, Hidalgo's government authorities informed about a forest fire in San Nicolás Flores, where the waste burning triggered the fire, which remained active for several days. In Chile, at least 2 people died and almost 20,000 were affected by the heavy rains in the central southern part of the country. In turn, the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Rescue stated that 2 citizens are missing, while more than 2,200 people are staying in shelters. Likewise, they indicated that approximately 1,698 houses were destroyed and at least 19 bridges collapsed. Chilean authorities also indicated that 6 health centers, more than 180 educational centers, and more than 460 kindergartens were affected by the floods. And Spain's State Meteorological Agency announced on Tuesday a state of alert for the heat wave that affects several areas of the country since last Sunday. The agency declared the maximum alert level for the Canary Islands, Extremadura, and Andalusia, while 17 other autonomous communities are on orange alert. Authorities don't rule out that temperatures could reach 44 degrees centigrade in the most affected areas. Non-governmental organizations reported 2 deaths in rural areas due to the hot temperatures. Industry and agricultural workers' representatives requested measures to mitigate the situation, including drinking plenty of water. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. Emmanuel Macron, President of France, called for an urgent crisis cabinet meeting in the face of the strong protests taking place in several cities across the country. The demonstrations that began in Nanterre, an exclusive district in West Paris, after a policeman killed a 17-year-old Maghrebi young man with a gunshot, have prompted widespread criticism against the president and his interior minister, Gérald Darmanin, who this morning again defended police officers. The head of state affirmed that the coming hours there must be a recollection, referring to the White March summoned by the victims' relatives. Macron also said that they are preparing for the coming days. Also in this context, more than 30 people were arrested in France during the days of protest in the municipality of Nanterre following the murder of a young man by a security officer. According to local media, the incident in the department of Hauts-de-Seine resulted in 24 police officers with minor injuries and 40 cars set on fire. Government authorities detailed that a total of 2,000 police officers and gendarmes were deployed in the locality. In addition, there were vandalic acts or looting acts in the place, among which they were reported the burning of garbage containers. Because of this, the French National Assembly called for a minute of silence, and the mother of the deceased young man called for a march on Thursday, June 29th. A British Court of Appeals has declared the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as unlawful. In a judgment delivered in London, the Court of Appeals said that Rwanda was not a safe country for asylum seekers. In doing so, the judges reversed a ruling in December by the High Court, which dismissed most legal challenges to the plan. The decision is unlikely to be the final word in what has already been a prolonged legal battle over the government's offshoring plans, which have been fiercely criticized by activists and human rights groups. The government is expected to appeal to Britain's Supreme Court to try to overturn the decision. And now we address other topics. Switzerland blocked arms maker RUAG AG from selling 96 Leopard tanks to Ukraine, as it believes it will violate its neutrality principle. The Swiss company attempted to sell the tanks to the Ukrainian armed forces through the German company Rheinmetall. However, the Swiss Federal Council, the arm of the executive branch, determined that the sale was prohibited under current legislation. This is not the first time, though, that Switzerland has refused to send tanks to Ukraine. In October 2022, it also rejected a request made by Germany to donate outdated anti-aircraft rounds stored in Berlin, as there was no authorization for their use. The Swiss government's decision has generated much criticism, especially from its European neighbors and the United States, whose ambassador in Bern said that the European nation was experiencing its most serious geopolitical crisis since World War II. And the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov spoke on Wednesday about the mutiny attempt staged by the Wagner Group over the weekend and didn't rule out the possibility that the United States may have played a role in those events.
Statements have been made that the United States is not interfering in Russia's internal affairs, not planning a regime change in Russia. It was said by the Strategic Communications Coordinator, Mr. Kirby. If I'm not mistaken, knowing the track record of the United States regarding regime change, such a statement sounds somewhat artificial.
The top Russian diplomat also recalled that Washington openly finances opposition organizations in his country.
Knowing how a few years ago American foundations and non-governmental organizations worked in our country, what they did, how they courted and trained the opposition in every possible way, there is no need to go into this topic in detail. This is an obvious slideness.
The Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs declared the irregular situation with the Wagner Group over and assured that the events did not represent any change in the country's strategy with respect to the special operation in Ukraine.
President Putin has already answered over the past few days. He has repeatedly made detailed assessment of the current situation, emphasizing that having overcome the attempted mutiny, We have not sacrificed targets for a special military operation at all, and have not lost any positions on the battlefield.
We have a second break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, and there you will be able to re-watch our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. China and Vietnam expressed their interest in expanding their joint relations after the Economic and Trade Cooperation Forum held in Beijing. The meeting was attended by around 400 representatives from China and Vietnam, including the Chinese Vice Premier Liu Guozhong and the Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. According to official Vietnamese data, during the first 6 months of this year, Chinese investment in the country increased on almost $2 billion. Liu Guozhong, for his part, pointed out that the industrial and supply chains of the Asian giant and Vietnam have been interconnected and have achieved mutual cooperation in the fields of investment, obtaining remarkable results.
Through the joint efforts of people from all walks of life, economic and trade cooperation between China and Vietnam has kept deepening in recent years, achieving fruitful results. Bilateral trade has been developing vigorously. Even as the world economy faces severe challenges, trade between China and Vietnam has maintained a favorable development momentum. In the first 5 months of this year, the trade volume between China and Vietnam accounted for nearly 1/4 of China's overall trade with ASEAN. China is the largest trading partner of Vietnam, largest import market and second largest export market. Vietnam is China's largest trading partner in ASEAN.
I have met with representatives from Chinese enterprises to discuss how to create favorable conditions for Chinese enterprises in Vietnam. Through economic and trade cooperation, we hope to contribute to the good relationship between the two parties and two countries. So we propose establishing a working group to specifically promote economic and trade cooperation between the two countries, and we will work even more in the future to deepen cooperation and contribute to bilateral relations.
And on Wednesday, Nigerian Muslims in Lagos celebrated Eid al-Adha, one of the biggest feasts in the Islamic calendar. Faithfuls gathered for morning prayers at mosques or designated prayer grounds, and then they greet each other and engage in acts of charity. One of the main traditions of Eid al-Adha is the sacrifice of an animal, usually a goat, a sheep, a cow, or a camel. The purpose of the sacrifice is to remember a biblical story about the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his own son after receiving a command from God in a dream. The meat from the sacrifice animal is divided into 3 parts, 1/3 for the family, 1/3 for the relatives and friends, and 1/3 for the less fortunate. Eid al-Adha marks the yearly Muslim pilgrimage to visit Mecca in Saudi Arabia, the holiest place in Islam. And some business owners and livestock vendors pointed out that this year getting rams have been difficult, and they hope next year will be better.
I used to get 2 ram and keep 2 ram, but this year, in fact, even about to pay one now, I'm still going up and down. You can even see me, I go straight down, coming back down here, 150, 200. Come on, it's not easy for this year.
We usually buy the rams in CFA francs, and when we bring them to Nigeria, we sell them in Naira. But now the Naira currency has lost so much value that we buy everything with Chadian CFA.
It is not possible for you to compare this year with the previous year because normally there's an inflation in everything currently in Nigeria. So with that said, you should understand it won't be cheap. So sincerely, ram is kind of like costly this year. So we pray maybe probably for next year to be back to normal.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada Cruz. Thank you for watching.